Hi, everybody. This is S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com. And I am really excited here today because I am bringing on Smokey Saint. And Smokey Saint is a Christian who's never been on my channel. He's been really shaking things up out there on the internet. He's been doing quite a bit of stuff that's attracted tons of attention. He seems to somehow, in just a few months, attracted numerous atheists who are responding to him in multiple videos. He's gotten on debates on Modern Day Debate Channel. He's even talked to people like Matt Powell, who's a rather controversial figure in the Christian group. And he's actually taken a pretty open stance towards a number of things. But one really interesting thing is he has a very set standard of what his values are, what his cultural values are. And I think he adheres to those very well. And so I suspect he leans kind of to the right and conservative politically. I'm
yes,
not sure, though.
You'd be correct.
Yes. Okay. So he's a conservative Christian, and so he's got a lot of really interesting views. So without further ado, let me have Smokey Saint introduce himself, and I'm going to make sure I haven't put the link in yet, but I will make sure to put a link to his channel so you guys can go in there and subscribe. So Smokey.
Appreciate it, SJ. And thank you so much for having me today. I really do appreciate the invitation and also following through after a couple atheists had the brilliant thought to attempt to cancel culture me and the beautiful hypocritical display of sending you some clips that you thought would be unsavory of me and keep me from appearing on today's show. So thank you. Thank you for not being one to indulge in cancel culture.
Oh, yeah.
I am, of course, the Smokey Saint, one of the more recently and most hated individuals on YouTube in the great debate sphere. I get a lot of interesting vitriol and attention directed at me, which is interesting because I'm one of the newest ones on the block. Only been doing this about 4-5 months, I believe at this point. I have about 500 subscribers. Please come subscribe. Maybe help me get to 1,000. I'd really appreciate it. We do lots of unpacking complex theological topics, cultural topics, historical topics, things that Christians have a difficult time usually answering or coming to terms with because of a failed ability to grasp the nature and structure of our reality and really understand what we are and what state that we are in. We've had lots of cultural toxic influences work their way into our perceptions of scripture and theology, and I do want to combat some of that. So that's what my channel is about, bringing a little bit more rationality and also removing some of the stagnation that I've noticed inside the debate sphere for a little bit far too long. And that requires us to sometimes shake things up in some ways that many people might find to be unsavory. But it seemingly everyone has a lot to say about Smokey these days, no matter how small I am. So I think this is a good sign for the future. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, SJ.
Yeah, it's a great sign for the future. Well, but before I get over to our conversation, I want to say hi to the people in the chat. I already can see Jesse Camping, this one guy, the synagogue, it's misspelled rather interestingly. Chris Jones sharing stuff, GTV, my good friend G-Man, and he says that they do it to him all the time. So yeah, he's been a target of, whenever he gets on my channel, a lot of people come on there just because they want to see G-Man. And so
yeah, my heart was broken the other day, G-Man. I had SJ ask you, like, do you dislike me, G-Man? And G-Man said, I don't even know who he is. Oh, G-Man.
He'll know you today because he's watching right now, which is awesome. And
we need an introduction. We need a personal introduction, G-Man. Oh, yeah. And I see Basement Dweller. One of my Patreons is here. Good to see you, Basement.
Oh, good. Yeah, I saw Basement Dweller. I've seen that name a few times now lately. So on Praise I Am and on your channel. So
Basement Dweller wins the internet almost every day because his chat comments are beyond hilarious most of the time. Like the way he responds to people and trolls is amazing. Basement is a chat warrior.
A chat warrior. Okay. And we got Converse Contender and Speed of Sound of Gravity. We got a whole bunch of people here in the chat already. So they're all ready to hear. Now, so let me ask you this. Let me first ask you on your Christianity. So have you, because I don't know if we've talked or you've talked a lot about this, but have you always been a Christian, or are you a new Christian, or were you raised that way? What's your story?
Yeah, I've tried a bit to keep a lot of my personal testimony kind of out of the channel unless it was absolutely intrinsically necessary, but I've already shared this, and so I'll share this with you, of course, as well, kind of my basic breakdown of my story. Oh, the Rage is here. Awesome. Yeah, do you see how they show up? They all follow me. Do you see how this works? It's amazing. It's incredible. They can't help it. Anyway, no. Well, when I was younger, I actually grew up in a Christian household, and actually went to private school my entire life. I went to a Lutheran, strict Lutheran, part of the Wells Syndicate, growing up. from kindergarten through 8th grade, and then transitioned into a non-denominational Christian high school. So I was drilled in with scripture, theology, history, all these things growing up. I had a very, very strong grasp of theology and who God was when I came into ready to go to Bible college, believing I might do something in the ministry field, since I spent my entire life doing this. I'd already had a head start that, probably most pastors and ministers would die to have. So I figured maybe this is something I could do, but the dynamics and politics inside the structures of churches made it very, very difficult for me to function. The political structures many times of churches are not based upon adherence to doctrine or sound theology, but more to do with seniority or placement or political, leanings or attachment to certain people. And there's just a milieu that kind of works into some of these hierarchical structures. So I had a hard time functioning. I gravitated towards the secular realm. And I didn't think about ministry again. My faith ended up being a bit more of a back thought in my head. It allowed me to start adopting what I would say some very toxic perspectives, philosophies, theologies, like double predestinarian type of perspectives, things that I seem to be able to read from the text if I wasn't doing a diligent or thorough job trying to digest it. That led me down some very dangerous paths, my digestion of both reality and God. And I became a vitriolic, hate-filled hate theist. I despised the idea of God if he existed, and was angry at people that would dare continue to promote him as a monster. And through a series of tragedies, corrections, realizations, certain people and things and events being put in my path, I had to basically reason myself to the untenable fact that atheism just does not work. All of its arguments fall apart with even pretty much basic level of scrutiny. And so all of these things I had put into my belief network to convince myself of atheism was all fallacious. And once I realized that, the remaining thing that was left to me was theism. And it's about discovering which of these claims then was true, because I understood that I'm prone to confirmation bias. I grew up as a Christian. For all I knew, the only reason I thought it was the Christian God is because, I grew up that way. So I should open myself to the other God claims. And I did. And I looked into Islam heavily because I figured, well, this is the second largest religion, also comes from the Judaic tradition. The Judaic tradition is very historically strong. If there was anything with probably a grasp or a potential of being true, it might be in this direction. So I looked at all of these varying kind of religious claims that I thought were predominant, because I figured, well, if there was a personal God out there, and I believed it was a personal God, he would have sufficiently found a way to reach us. He wouldn't have, let it be lost to the obfuscation of history. He would have kept it preserved in some way. So I'm looking for the primary methods of which a God would have done that, and ultimately reasoned my way that the Christian God is the most sensical, rational, logical, plausible, and probable explanation of the nature of our reality. So I'm not one of those Christians that had supernatural experiences or spiritual lifelines. In fact, I'm very skeptical when Christians tell me those things, that they've had those experiences. To me, it's just a matter of this is what makes the most sense.
Good. Okay. I think that's fantastic. Now I have had those experiences, and I've had a lot of atheists tell me that too bad some Christians say they doubt your experiences. I don't blame you for doubting my experiences or anybody else's who claims that. In fact, I'm very skeptical when other people tell me they've had experiences, because I think, are they trying to be a charlatan about it? Are they trying to hawk books, or what are they doing? Right. And so
I have no books for sale, so I don't think I can be accused of that yet.
Yeah. So but it's also on the other side. If you do have the experiences and I think you don't go and share that, I think that that's unfair to God. He gave you experiences, so you should let people know about that. But getting back to your point, so I was kind of similar to you in a way, is I was raised in a Catholic school, a private Catholic school, K through 8. And then I went to a Catholic high school my freshman year. And then I transferred because it was an all girls school and I didn't like that. And so then I went over to a public high school and I ended up going to public colleges and drifted away kind of like you, but I didn't fully drift away into atheism. I never got to that point. But then you can reason your way back into Christianity. So you said you investigated the Muslim faith. Is there anything specific that you would tell people who are thinking of investigating the Muslim faith that you discovered that sort of ruled that one out for you?
Yeah, sure. It's real simple. Islam validates the Bible, and the Bible condemns Islam. So if the Bible is true, that means Islam is false. It's that simple.
Good. Okay, that sounds like David Wood's thing too.
Well, it really is that simple. I mean, when you look at even Muhammad's claims of being a prophet, he basically validates that he's a false prophet by every biblical criteria available. So, I mean, I mean, he even has false prophecies claiming that, there's going to be attacks on these people and it's going to be this many people and they get there and it's not, and it's like, he actually even had false prophecies. He appeared preaching in the name of a different God than Yahweh, as the Jews have been sold. Hey, if anyone comes and preaches in a God or makes a prophecy in a different God's name, they're false, so stone them. I mean, he fulfilled every criteria. So it didn't, I mean, after giving the Muslims the benefit of the doubt of giving the best cases possible, it just falls in on itself. Like, it's so clear because the problem is that Islam relies so heavily on the Bible. Muhammad even points to the Bible and says, hey, I'm in there. So when you rely so heavily on the book and the book so heavily condemns you, like it was pretty easy to come to that. So, and plus, then I looked into, some of the mystical beliefs inside the backing of Zoroastrian, stuff. And that was just kind of like, well, this God didn't do a very good job preserving this text. You know what I mean? And then it was kind of maybe something to do with the Hindus, and then it's like, well, Brahma, lives for one day and then everything ends. And that one day is 4 billion years old. And we're about 8 billion years overdue for that. And, but this is just some of those anecdotal examples of some of these things that were contradictory, were fallacious to me in terms of while I was researching these, where the Bible seemed to consistently stand strong, even when I thought I had caught the Bible. And I guess that was maybe one of those things later on towards really challenging my beliefs of atheism was like to see if I could catch the Bible. Like, could I make an argument that would stump a scholar or a commentator or something like that? Like could I pull apart a piece of scripture and show them something that they hadn't seen before? The more I did that with each passage, the more I picked it apart, the more I delved into it, the more validated it became. It was an interesting revelation to me. It's like where I was looking to find methods to falsify it and end up proving me that, like, well, you just had no idea what you were talking about, and I don't buy into this atheist thing where you pretty much dismiss scholarship to make your case. I mean, you can, because that just shows that you're so desperate to cling to your atheism, but I wanted to be more genuine with it. And I wanted to actually be able to stump the better arguments, but atheists don't have any good arguments. And that's why it all just fell apart for me.
That's interesting. I've got a question here from G-Man. Actually, a couple people asked questions. So one was, are you a young earth creationist? And the other one was, ask you about your born again experience.
Yeah, G-Man, we're not going to agree on that born again experience again, situation, I'm sure. Yeah, born again experience. Well, first of all, I am old earther. Second of all, born again experience, I don't know what that is. Because again, you just heard, my statement. Did I have some sort of like realistic transitioning from my atheist to my Christian realm? Like, I had a submission. I had I would say an emotional moment. Would I call it like, would I necessarily classify it as that? I don't know. I mean, could that be the born again moment we're talking about? Perhaps. Like, there was a moment I transitioned from saying, well, God is a horrible, disgusting, reprehensible monster if he exists, to he's one of the most incredibly gracious, benevolent, merciful, precious things that there possibly could be. And I've just been misjudging him this entire time in my ignorance and hubris. I had that moment, if you want to call that a born again moment, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a significant moment because you received insight about God, which I think is reasonable, and I think it's consistent with the Bible. So I think sounds like a good deal to me. Let me see. So we've got some great people in the chat. If you guys have questions for Smokey, feel free to just tag me so I can see your question for sure. But we have a mix of atheists and somebody said a lot of people from Rage's channel are here.
I imagine he shouted this out. Yes, he's one of my best cheerleaders and promoters. Yes, in fact, this is amazing. He said today, I think during the stream, that whether or not he has a smile on his face or a good day has a lot to do with me. Which, I mean, the admission alone of that is pretty startling. But you do you, bro. That's interesting. Okay, the obsession is palpable. But okay.
That's funny. He said something here about bong hits, so I don't know. It's just like,
I don't know what that's about.
So that's funny. So yeah, it's I think your background's really interesting. And let me ask you this. I'm pretty sure the first place I saw you was on Modern Day Debate Channel. You've been on there a few times, and I think one of the times you went up there
I think about
8
times.
times. Wow.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
and you've paired up with other people. And the first time I heard you guys, you and another male, I don't remember his name, but it
would be Maddox, probably. Logical.
Yeah, I think it was, and he gave. You guys gave some
they're referring
scientific.
to us as like brothers of thunder. Basically, we're kind of having the same.
Like
they
the sons of Zebedee.
They don't like us. They do not like us. They are definitely out. The atheist community is out to try and crush us. It's pretty amazing. It's incredible.
Well, the thing I thought was really good about that particular debate was you guys did a lot. You actually did some scientific arguments. You made some pretty solid scientific arguments.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So I thought that was great.
Yeah, no, I like to merge, I'm not a pure evidentialist or presuppositionalist or something. I presuppositional tools, evidentiary tools, but I reasoned my way to this. So, to me, it's kind of like I will just give, chains of evidence, things that I found convincing. And because convincing is an arbitrary metric, everyone's going to have a different metric of that which they find to be convincing. The only thing I can really do generally is either answer their questions or elaborate on what was convincing to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit, because I'm thinking I just spent a lot of time this morning. I listened for about an hour to this this thing on discovery. It was a discovery thing, and the person was talking about the origins of life and what little we know about the origins of life and even about the cell itself, like how scientists have not been able to make their own cell using the building blocks. And so I think that that's really fascinating, but it's kind of I think they kind of dupe us in some of the literature, which that speaker talked about. He said, look what this person said in Nature. He basically talked about how he took a Corvette, pulled out the engine, put another engine back in, and got something to kind of run, but not run as well.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. No, we've interviewed a couple, and God bless Tony. Shout out to Tony Anthony Maurice, because he's been helping our circle of apologists get these really kind of interesting names in science to come and do these interviews with us, and really equip the saints with some better understanding of I guess I would say the scientific failings in the atheist community and their I would say religious faith in naturalism. And part of that has to do with this belief where they seem to keep saying, well, abiogenesis, we've almost got it figured out. No, we're nowhere close. In fact, we're pretty much nowhere close than we were 50 years ago. We've done a lot in terms of dissecting components, but in terms of getting anywhere close to that first cell or even those first functional proteins of the cell is quite a challenge, especially for considering that it should be done in prebiotic conditions. The whole claim, and it was actually unpacked beautifully. I recommend everyone, if you haven't seen it, go to my channel, and you'll see 2 interviews, one with Dr. Tour, who's
who I heard. That's who I heard today. He was awesome.
Yes. He is on my channel. We did an interview with him and Tony, and we talked specifically about the assumptions and the failings inside the abiogenesis world and framework. And he unpacked a lot of that. It was a beautiful mic drop moment. It was a quick, little 20-minute segment, came in, answered Tony's questions, dropped out. We were done. It was beautiful. Excuse me. But the idea that, what I unpacked further with Dr. Fuzz Rana, who we also had on for an interview, he was there for an hour and a half, also answering questions. And the idea was that what the atheists are relying upon is faith in the idea that a super complex, super precise series of microenvironments that were able to produce things like distilled water and perfect light refraction to provide UV rays that the sun wasn't even giving off. All this stuff just so happened, basically all the things they need in the chemist lab, all of a sudden manifested. Things that would stretch the conditions outside of normal prebiotic earth conditions. And inside this environment, somehow, some way, by, I don't know, lightning or magic, cells formed. And they criticize us for saying that this is clearly essentially needed an intelligent agent to do this. We need an intelligent agent today to even do this, to jerry-rig this, to even get close to this. So the idea that the claim of, well, this could all happen naturally. If we have this whole lab of equipment jerry-rigging all this stuff and then we get life, we prove that it happened naturally. This is the type of reasoning inside the atheist community and the approach to abiogenesis. They don't know that their entire belief They've built a house on clouds. There's nothing there. Like this idea that, well, if I accept evolution, I don't need to worry about abiogenesis. I mean, this is part of that religious atheist sophistry that they desperately have to cling to.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you meant James Tour. Somebody mentioned him in the chat. That's definitely who I listened to, and that was the first time I'd heard him, and he was extremely impressive and articulate. And he told the people in the audience, he said, if I'm saying something wrong, if you're a chemist, I need you to stand up. And a couple of people who were chemist scientists didn't stand up to say that he wasn't saying the right stuff. So he came out there with a really powerful thing that I tweeted out. But I've also had Fuzz Rana on my channel. Somebody in the chat said bring Kent Hovind. He's been on my channel too. And so right. I've had Hugh Ross on my. I've had other in
Hugh Ross. Yeah,
I've definitely had some scientists on my channel.
I hope in the near future I will interview Hugh Ross, because I've been a fan of Hugh Ross for years now. I mean, he was my go-to guy of like, well, the Bible's Genesis account is garbage, so I can't believe in this. And here's Hugh Ross. Yeah, you know, it was beautiful. It was a synergistic union. I've been following him. I've read multiple of his books. Yeah, I'm a fan of Hugh Ross.
Yeah, no, I am too. I've read at least, I think, 5 or 6 of his books I have downstairs, and so I've had him on my channel a few times. And then I've had other reasons to believe people like Fuzz, as I mentioned, and that you've had too, right. And Ken Samples, and who else have I had? I forget, but I've had some good people on here, including you. It's great to have you on here.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, this is really great. And so I'm curious to know. Now, so what do you think that these people in the chat, they're probably wanting to know a little bit about Matt Powell. I don't want to talk about Matt behind his back, but I want to say I have had a couple people I can see. You mentioned that you know him.
I've never seen so many people be so up in arms about trying to figure out what my opinion on Matt Powell is. Like, it's amazing. Like, I've seen the atheists, like, it's almost like they leverage it in every conversation. Well, like, how do you feel about Matt Powell? And like, whether you say yes or no, we'll be like, well, if you say yes, then they're just going to judge you. Oh, you're homophobe and you love to kill gay people. You know, like, and if you say no, then it's like, you know, you're dismissing a brother in the Lord. Aren't you supposed to believe what I mean, the thing is, they'll try to leverage it either way because they're horribly disgusting, dishonest people most of the time. But in terms of like how I feel about Matt Powell, and I think I mentioned this just a little bit before stream, I love Matt Powell. I love Matt Powell as a brother in the Lord. I feel bad for Matt Powell because I feel like Matt Powell is still being unfairly McCarthyism type style stigmatized to people that he has since, you know, really kind of tried to distance himself with without crossing lines or burning bridges, which I can understand, and anyone should. I don't think Matt Powell gets dignity or respect as a person in the online community, and this is why he's become such a hot topic item. I defend Matt Powell. I love Matt Powell. I would love to talk with Matt Powell. I would love to have saint sharpening sessions with Matt Powell where we unpack scriptures and go over things. Everyone has just treated him like a pariah, both on the Christian side and the atheist side, just out of shame and fear of speaking up for him. And there's been a lot of shame and fear controlling this realm for too long because no one has thick skins anymore, because everyone is governed by their feelings and emotions. This needs to stop. It is part of the cancer inside our culture, eating away our ability to react to things with appropriate judicial discernment. This is part of the problem, and I reject it and I renounce it fully.
Yeah, well, there is a cancel culture, and I think that's a massive problem. There's a couple things going on here that have spoken to this cancel culture. Number one, the rise in social media. So social media since about 2007 has exploded. Number two, the rise in free speech. I mean, we're supposed to have free speech. Number three, though, in the United States, which is the third largest country in the world, so this is significant. In the United States, most of the states are at-will states, meaning that if you're working for an employer, they can hire you or fire you at will. And what that means is they don't have to have a reason. Now, if it's a discriminatory reason because it's against your religion or your race or something like that, they can't do that. But if it's a non-discriminatory reason, if your employer doesn't like what you say about politics, for example, if they're in an at-will state and you don't have a contract with them or anything like that, you're high risk. And so people are really afraid to say what they really think. Right. And so a lot of people think that this political event that's coming up, as we all know, the presidential election in November, a lot of people think that there might be a silent majority. What do you think about that? Who haven't said anything because they're afraid?
They have to, and I completely agree with that because of what the culture has done. I mean, look at the desperation that the SJWs and the leftists will engage in, which is why I find it so funny how like anyone can almost even align on that side of the political spectrum at this point, unless you're just a real low life or just incredibly dumb. Because what you're seeing is these people, they're going back into like way deep records, like tweets from like 8 years ago, and pulling up something that maybe in the context of today might be unsavory and using it to cancel these people and silence them. And as if to say, well, this person, it's the ultimate ad hom. Because what you do is you go look for something that you can use to say, you no longer have to listen to this person ever again. This is that kind of that core backbone of the cancel culture, and it's pure evil. It's pure evil. And by the way, it's hypocritical and contradictory to the principles that they claim to espouse, which is non-bigotry, which is that you take people case by case instances, that you don't automatically approach them with a bigoted thinking of, well, you've said this one thing, so I dismiss you entirely now. But this is how they think. Supposedly, they're supposed to want to reject these things, but many times they have bigot brains. Like they are dissecting these things, and this is what causes them to need to virtue signal their way out of their bigotry, because they have very low thinking, and they do these types of conflations and very narrow type thinking, very shallow thinking. And this is why I call them bigot brains sometimes. Like that's because that's what they end up demonstrating.
Yeah. Well, I mean that I don't like. See, the cancel culture drives me crazy, and I do think it's bigoted to take one position where you're saying, "Oh, I'm open-minded, I'm a rational thinker, I'm a reasonable person," but then I don't want to hear you say anything that I disagree with, because if you're going to do that, I'm going to contact your employer and try to get you fired. So,
well, exactly.
It's terrible.
It's crossing the line. It's why is my life, why is my personal life open to attack for what I say? Why did that become a thing? Oh, because what you say might convince other people, and then we have a problem. Yeah, that's kind of how it's supposed to work. Right? Like the point that I can say what I want to say, and the point that you can say what you want to say, means that we can counter each other's points, and we both agree that it shouldn't ever lead to violence. That's how that's supposed to work. We've decided to rely upon people's ability to digest the best argument. Now, granted, sometimes that fails. Sometimes politics and obfuscation and tactics win over. But we still attempt to, I think, in our best efforts, to believe that a majority of people will be able to see through the nonsense. And that's, I think, what we've always relied upon in our culture to kind of keep a lot of this, glue together. Civility.
We need that. We need both sides. And I think, just like what you mentioned a little while ago, you were mentioning how they're going to go back. Some people will dig up your tweets from 8 years ago. And I think about Ben Shapiro. He actually made a list of all of the embarrassing things that he said since he was just a young kid when he started being political and getting in the public eye. And so he said some things he regrets, and he just put them all out together at one place. And anytime somebody brings those up, he said, yeah, I admitted, okay, that was a mistake. I said that like 20 years, not 20 for him, but 10 years ago. And so now you're going to bring that up again. And I think people need to realize that people do change their opinions on things. They move forward. And so you don't go back and try to dig up dirt from 10 years ago, especially if the person doesn't still hold whatever that position was. Right. And that could speak to Matt Powell, because maybe Matt Powell's most crazy thing was, what his most crazy statement was, that Richard Dawkins found and tweeted out. And that's how Matt got so much notoriety.
That one, I've been asking people to kind of provide me this damning evidence, and maybe I haven't seen that one. I haven't seen any tweet that I don't know about. But I have asked people to provide, like Rage played like a clip of something, like because he thought it was showing me up that about what Matt Powell was, but it was just him asking intentionally loaded questions that were awkwardly put to Matt Powell, like just so that he could do this. Like he was obviously and blatantly acting extremely dishonestly in terms of doing that, and Matt Powell was actually trying to be honest, but he can't see that. So like I was looking for like, well, what is this everyone's saying that's so wrong about Matt himself? I found like plenty of stuff to say, there's plenty wrong with Anderson. I wouldn't even disagree with all that, but like the idea of this like, well, Powell is Anderson because of this statement. I don't see that. I just wasn't seeing that. I guess I wasn't wanting to indulge the same type of desperation that the atheist community was to judge someone, because again, hypocritical dumpster brain people, this is what they do.
Well, here's the thing that Matt Powell said that is the most controversial thing. There's one thing that he said, and I heard it and I thought, oh no. And I want to say it was on Skylar Fiction's channel, but I'm not sure where this was. And I think that's what got Skylar Fiction's channel up to about 5,000 viewers, actually, is I'm pretty
Okay.
sure.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, he was talking about gay people, and he was talking about some of the Old Testament laws and
Uh-huh.
how gay people were treated in the Old Testament.
Uh-huh.
And so then he said, today in modern times, something that we should do is that gay people should be humanely executed, essentially.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so that was, I'm sure he doesn't really think that. I mean, at least if
I
he does still think that, I think he needs to tweak his.
if he does still think that, I would want to have a very serious talk with him about that. I'm not going to go out and say what he believes because I don't know, and I haven't actually. I mean, aside from him popping up in my chat, a few times, I mean, we haven't had an actual like direct voice conversation at all yet. But I would be happy to ask him that, and because no, I don't share that at all. And this is what I've said to some atheists too, and they constantly use this as leverage. That Andersonite cult has had nothing but problems, and there's a lot of people who I think are decent people who got pulled into it and have been trying really hard to claw out, and I'm willing to give each one of them the benefit of the doubt until they say one way or the other. I just don't want to engage in this disgusting type of blanket judgment that the atheists want us to indulge, and we shouldn't, because when they convince us to do this, when they shame us into attacking our fellow brothers for their reasons, we're not operating correctly. We're indulging their nonsense. We're indulging their disgusting worldviews, which stand on nothing at all. I mean, we need to approach this from the level of what we're called, and I really do strive to do that. I really do, and I've said this many times, I do strive to keep, as much as people will say I'm harsh, people don't agree with my methodology all the time, but it's not like I am that way all the time. And that's the point. If I was like that all the time, then that would be my reputation. I probably wouldn't have that much of a following. It's the people that see through me and realize, no, Smokey reserves certain things for certain people that have earned it. The atheists want to desperately, in their bigot brain thinking, as they are prone to do, try to say, no, Smokey does this to everyone he disagrees with. You'll see this regularly in comments. You'll see, Smokey does this to everyone he disagrees with. Well, that is a blanket, like an absolutely factually false statement. That there have been wonderful dynamics with people that we've had a level of mutual respect, because they are not attacking vitriolic trash clowns who are simply trying to look for validations for their disbelief, but because they are genuinely looking, because they're inquisitive, because they don't necessarily know the better sides of the Christian arguments, and they're attempting to learn. These people get all the patience, all the respect, all the consideration in the world. And the atheists can't stand that about me. They want me to be horrible to everyone so that they can make their case, but that's just not who I am. So they ignore this component of my character and use that as leverage to attack me. And this is just more display to the Christian community, thank God for them, of how desperate, how incredibly desperate and dishonest they actually are. And so anyone with half a brain is able to see what happens on many of these channels and say, yep, Christians are on the right side on this one. And that's all I strive for. So,
Yeah, I think in all fairness, I want to say there's a couple of things. So one thing is, a lot of us have said things, just you've said things, I've said things, Matt Powell said things. People have said things that they probably would like to take back at some point. Or maybe you say things, sometimes you go a little bit off the edge a little bit. Of
course, absolutely.
But what you're saying, and I think I can agree with this, is a lot of people like to take cognitive shortcuts, heuristics. They like to say, okay, the stereotype someone based on a single statement. This person must be a horrible person because this came out of that person's mouth. And I think that you could have, I think Matt Powell honestly was misguided. Probably he's a young kid. I think when he said this, he was maybe 20 years old or something. Very young. Yep, just a young kid. He went behind the ears. And so
think about the heresies I believed, likely when I was coming into 20s, just out of ignorance, not intentionally, just because, I was part of a structure that taught me those things. I was still coming into my own of learning this stuff for myself. Of course. I mean, my God, don't we give a little bit of credit to youth these days? Don't we tend to do that?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think you need to, and I think what you're getting at here is take a look at the whole person, the whole package, and try not to judge them on a couple of bad comments or bad days they had.
Don't be a bigot brain. Exactly. Don't be a bigot brain. That's the lesson.
That's the thing. Yeah. And so, wait, I see a question here. Does Smokey agree with smashing? Geez. Okay. He's referring to Psalm 137.
Oh,
are you familiar with that psalm?
I am. Yeah. I wonder about the atheists out there that pose that inquiry to us. What type of statement would you be writing in a song that is attempting to recall the time that you were being put into chains, led out of a city, and watching the soldiers of that city take your children and happily and merrily bash their heads against rocks, laughing and cajoling the entire time in the sight of the people while you're being led away, because they don't want to have to worry about caring for the children in the journey of captivity. So it's easier to just kill them in the most horrible, grotesque way possible in the sight of the people. And this psalmist is recounting in sheer agony and terror and horror what was done to his people. And he is having an emotional surge at the statement of having seen this grotesquerie played in front of him. And he is delivering a statement to the people saying, blessed are those that will be happy bashing your kids on the rocks as you did in the sight of us, you disgusting, foul, horrible people.
No, I see that too.
It's inside the text.
I think that's, and the same person, SD, he comes in here a lot. He's wondering about, here's the thing, he's asking about killing witches. And now we can say Christians in the past, there have been some bad players, bad actors. And I can see you find that in every single group in the past.
Amen. Samson was a raging a-hole.
Yeah, well, even in like we can look at the last century. There's examples of bad atheists. The atheists don't want me to bring them up, but they killed 120 million people. So it's just, there are bad actors in every group. And so because there was witches killed, Salem, there was during the Crusades, some people had some bad actions. Sure.
Well, I do always usually challenge atheists whenever they say, look at all the bad things Christians did. Are you Catholic?
No, I'm now Baptist.
Thank God for that. Okay, well then you'll forgive me for what I'm about to say. Can any of the atheists that will attempt to claim Christians have done all these atrocities in the past, can you name atrocities that were not perpetrated by anyone other than the pagan-infused Catholic Church state? Or the officers therein that were appointed not based upon their theological adherence, but based upon their political positioning? If you can point out those instances, maybe you'll have a better case. The fact of the matter is they rely upon pretty much everything the Catholics did as a means of which to justify, judge the Christians, and say that Christians are garbage. That again, bigot thinking, not being able to separate the differences in the ideologies or the histories, or why there even needed to be a church split at all. Most atheists are completely ignorant of this and not understanding what the church was actually doing between the years of 300 and 1050 AD. They are ignorant of it, and this is why they make these types of disgusting judgmental obfuscations.
Yeah, well, just to piggyback on your point. So if you're not familiar with this, if people are just sort of joining here, there were two factions in the church. So they split off to the east, the Eastern Orthodox, and they split off to the west, the Roman Catholics. And there's still that split today, the Greek Orthodox versus the Roman Catholics. And so for many years there were those two distinctions, but then it wasn't until Martin Luther's time that they split off again, and we started seeing this growth of Protestantism around the 15th century. So we've got, I believe it was around the 15th or 16th. I got to get his exact year, but. But so we have, for the most part, we have many centuries of Catholicism, and we had some bad actors in the past, but there are also bad actors everywhere. The interesting thing is, why doesn't anyone, two things, why don't they today talk about what Christians are doing today that's supposedly so bad? And number two, what Jesus did. I mean, no one wants to, they want to talk about, oh, the God of the Old Testament is so evil. Well, Jesus is the word of made in flesh. Why not talk about him?
Well, modern atheism is nothing about skepticism. This is the obfuscation. This is the smoke screen they throw up. It's about cynicism. It's about denying any possibility. It's activism. It's activism that's taken a weird, disgusting turn, which is to find every way to basically smear Christianity for the sake of denying. Well, by the way, why so much effort is spent on smearing Christianity is by the atheist's own admission that it's the most sensible of the God claims. I mean, it's not. I mean, it is one of the largest, but they don't spend this much effort on Islam. And they say, "Oh, Islam isn't much of a threat. This is a Christian country." Like, well, okay, great, but you spend all of your effort trying to discount Christianity, believing you're discounting God claims in general, seemingly. With almost this kind of, I would say, psychological kind of in the back of their head, they're almost admitting that Christianity is the most sensical of the God claims. It's the biggest threat. It's the one to spend the most attention on. That seems to be usually what they're doing. So I guess what I see is this kind of desire to turn atheism from a belief, which I think it was kind of at one point, kind of just a passive statement of personal psychology, into actual active political activism. That's what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing some group of certain people who have fallaciously and with horrible argumentation said a society without any belief in God is somehow better. They have no evidence to back their case, but they preach it. They preach it in their religion of atheism. It's one of those things that they just believe with no evidence or rationality.
Actually, I want to back up your point. You have two things I want to mention. The first thing is when you said, why are they focusing on Christianity? It is the largest faith. It is a faith that's dominant here in the United States. However, as Hugh Ross has reported, he's done a lot of studies into the occult, and he noticed that a lot of people who do go into the occult, when they encounter these demonic spirits, the demonic spirits are always shouting out against Jesus, and they don't pick on any other gods. They don't pick on the Indian gods or any other gods that are out there. So that's kind of interesting to note. And number two,
really interesting.
Europe, I mean, just look at Europe's foundation. Europe is heaving on the fumes of Christianity right now. And so, yes, we have some European countries that are becoming increasingly atheistic because also they're becoming increasingly comfortable, and they've got the social safety net. So people don't use the churches, especially if they have high levels of extrinsic religiosity. However, we don't have a test point to see exactly what it means for a country to be fully atheist beyond what we had in the USSR, China, and Cambodia. And so I know the atheists will say, well, what about humanist countries like Sweden, which is pretty high in atheism or something like that? Well, let's watch how it plays out in Sweden, because things have actually been taking a negative turn in some places.
Yes, Sweden, when atheists say, look at Sweden, I say, oh, you mean the rape capital of Europe? Like, yeah, it is. Yeah, like they focus on the fact that the culture there has sufficiently, and by the way, this is what they like to ignore. It was a heavily Christian infused culture with Christian infused morals that worked its way into the cultural norm. So there were certain things about levels of standards in society that Christians have kind of Christians in America, I would say, kind of let deteriorate a bit, but inside their culture, even as it moved towards secularism, it kind of kept some of those intrinsic cultural standards of morality as it moved forward. What I saw is essentially gravitating into more of this like secular state in the Sweden or in this kind of like Northern European realm, is this embracing of an ideology to accept all and have this tolerance to almost everything. And the Muslims are coming in, they're showing them tolerance, which in their book is, of course, virtuous, it's moral. But the Muslims are now just kind of starting to run things, and rape gangs are forming, grooming gangs are forming, and they don't seem to have the justification to necessarily quell it or fight it as they should in some regards. So it's just the culture is running away with itself on morality.
Well, that's the problem. That's the thing about United States that differentiates us. When a lot of cultures came in here in the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s, people came in here and they assimilated into the United States and learned the English language. However, a lot of cases in Europe where the Muslims are coming into these countries, they're keeping their own unique groups, and they're not necessarily assimilating into the country. And
Right.
that down the road could be a big problem. They have higher birth rates, and the Europeans have very low birth rates, and so, I mean, traditional Europeans who aren't immigrants.
And they hate that because that's the nationalist argument. But the idea, of course, is yes, you don't want to create little pockets inside your country. You want to have a trickle effect so that everyone, kind of integrates into the culture, as opposed to them creating pockets of their own culture in your country. That's just kind of how you should expect. Because if you're going to come here, it should be because you like the culture, not because you want to bring your culture here. That's generally how it's supposed to go.
Yeah. I mean, that's how it traditionally was in the United States. When people would come over from other countries, they made a point to make sure their kids would grow up in the English language, because
they were so proud of being an American. Like they got here and they're here like, I'm an American. I want to be an American. I want to soak myself in everything. Like everyone that got here was so proud of it, and they get here and they're just whiny and it should be better. Like it's just whiny. It's all you hear from the left is whining. Like, well, it's not great because it was never perfect. Like, come on. Like it's like the desperation is amazing.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons, if you want to talk about the rise of a person like Donald Trump, how Donald Trump can come into office is because there's a rise in populism, meaning
Yes.
that people have felt disenfranchised from the
Yes.
Democratic Party. The independents have felt like, especially the working white males, okay, the working worker class white males have felt like, okay, the Democrats aren't addressing us. In fact, they're using identity politics to sort of raise everybody else's elevation and not help us at all. And so they've gravitated towards Trump, and now Trump's got this he's got a major populist movement going, and it
Yeah.
could play out again at this next election.
Have you ever been watching any of the clips that pop up on YouTube? It'll say like leaving the left, hashtag leaving the left or something like that. Have you seen any of those?
Well, I haven't seen those, but I do listen to Ben Shapiro and Rubin
All
a
right.
lot.
Some of them are really popular, and like why I recommend, like especially people that tend to lean, excuse me, a little bit on the left or towards the Democratic leanings, is to go watch those videos, because what you hear is Democrats giving Democratic reasons why they can't stay on the left
Mhm.
anymore. And that's one of the more convincing arguments. Like when we go and talk to the Muslims, we use Muslim arguments. Like the atheists, if they were smart, if they're going to go to the Christians, they'll bring Christian arguments, but they don't. And that's the idea. You go inside their worldview to do your
Mhm.
critique, to make the most compelling argument. So I like that the Democrats are coming out and saying, no, like this isn't what we stand for. Like this isn't even moral anymore. This is just noise. This is just, people run amok with their emotions, and like we have no standards, we have no like measures, we have no borders, like we have no like boundaries of like this stuff. We basically just have to indulge feelings, and like as long as feelings is feelings, it's just craziness. And so I always encourage people, and if you haven't seen them, go watch a few, like even the more popular ones, because they're pretty compelling.
I made one myself because I told you before when we started up, I did make a video that I talked about the things that I was upset about, because I consider myself an independent right now. I haven't
Right.
chosen a party for the next election. I'm not even sure. I mean, I have to plug my nose to vote. I don't know. But I want to say that here's what they've done to disenfranchise
Let's
me.
have another stream and I'll convince you to vote Trump, okay? We'll have another stream and I'll
Oh, my
convince
husband's been working on me daily
you.
with no idea.
I'll
So then
help him.
I've
I'll
got
help him. We'll do a three stream. Bring him in and me, and we'll both just convert you. We'll convert you to Trump. It'll happen.
Oh, he works on it all the time. It's so funny. But I wanted to say, I don't like what they're doing. Their movements towards making it much easier to have an abortion. I think we need to be moving towards really telling people not to have abortions, going anti-abortion, talking about how bad that can hurt people. I mean, here we're talking about countries that are going to have really big problems in the year 2050. There have been people who have forecasted that over 50% of the population will be 65 and over in a lot of the developed countries by 2050. We need more kids. And when you kill 1 million of them a year in abortions, that's not helping the situation. And
Right. Yeah, it's a genocide, and it's horrendous, and I worry. Oh gosh, I'm going to make some Christians angry with this one. I don't touch the abortion topic too much because I have some pretty specific thoughts on it here and there, but like that will definitely absolutely not align with most Christians. But like to me, it's a monstrous, grotesque, horrible practice that we have allowed to get run amok. And I worry, like there's a couple really great ministries out there. What is it? Apologia Church, Jeff Durbin, he runs that. What
yeah,
is it? endabortionnow.com. I think it's one of the biggest abortion, like end abortion advocacies out there, and it's a wonderful ministry, and they just throw tons of money at it, and they accomplish lots of wonderful good. They keep people from murdering their children. There's nothing greater than that for some of these efforts. But like I almost worry that like Christians, we've been fighting the battle on the wrong front. Like we've retreated so far that now we're actually almost fighting the wrong war. Like at one point we were fighting the war inside the schools to say, be responsible if you have sex. Don't have sex, celibacy is best. But if you do, and here's why celibacy is best. Let's give you the reasons why this is a good way to go and why you'll benefit from it. But if you do, be responsible, because if you're not responsible, look at this grotesque, horrible, monstrous, nightmarish situation you might find yourself in. Like we used to push that war, the war of the preventionist, Now we're in the war of the reactionist. Now we're in the war of standing in front of the abortion clinics, pleading with people before they go in. We've been pushed out of the spectrum of where we should be battling into where the atheists want us to be battling. And this is one of those dynamics I would like to eventually bring forefront in the conversation to say maybe we should try to, push the battle back to the lines where it belongs, so we aren't making very, very difficult possible sociological complications on our society by fighting the wrong battle at the wrong time. Let's try to remind the kids how monstrous and disgusting and vile this thing is that abortion becomes when you I mean, if anyone's ever heard of how the procedure is described, it's just the most disgusting, foul thing you've ever heard, especially when you realize that's a baby. It's heartbreaking. So, once your heart hits that point with it, you start to really, really think about it in different levels, because it is slaughter. It's slaughter of the innocent. It's monstrous.
Yeah, no, I'm going to back your point, how I turned myself from being pro-choice to pro-life. And I'm not saying, I'm not extending this out fully covering, saying I'm going to be focusing on the 1% of people who are raped or incestuous relationships. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking especially about those who use abortion as a means of birth control.
As Ben Shapiro would say, I'll give you the 1% if we can outlaw the rest. What I mean?
It's when people use it as birth control. That's right. And there are people who do that. And so let me tell you what changed me. So I get married to my husband a little bit later in life. I get pregnant the first time, I have a miscarriage, which was really tragic. The second time I get pregnant, I just felt so blessed to have my first son, and it was amazing. The third time I get pregnant was with my second son. I go in there to the ultrasound, and the doctors say, oh, guess what? He has 2 soft markers for Down syndrome, echogenic heart and echogenic bowels. But don't worry, if it turns out after you get your amnio results back, if it turns out that he's going to have Down syndrome, you can go ahead and terminate the pregnancy. And I was like, what? You're referring to my baby as terminate the pregnancy? Like, they're trying to dehumanize him. And so I became pro-life that day and decided there's no way I'm giving up the baby, no matter what condition he's in. And he was born without Down syndrome. But my point is that they dehumanize it. They call it a clump of tissue. They call it everything. And I had an ultrasound picture where I saw his little body, and I thought, no.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're incredibly thankful you didn't. And,
oh my gosh, he's beautiful. He's awesome.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing too. Like, they have all this faith that these predictions are going to be factual. This baby's going to be, sad or suffering or, have all these difficulties. Maybe you want to terminate. And there's so many stories of how that person had one of the most incredible, fulfilling lives of any of us. And, and like the thing is, like this faith in the system and the predictions and the medical science, they put all this faith in this. They won't put faith in God. We put faith in God, and we say, well, this baby's life is in God's hands. We're going to leave it to God, and we have faith in that. And we believe that God, I believe, definitely does act in those instances where there is a supernatural covering of faith on a child. I believe God's very involved in that. I believe it's one of the blessings of children in Christian families is that God's interested in the nurturing and raising of that child, and I think He's there in the raising of it. I think I went a little bit off tangent there. I apologize.
No. I think you're totally right. I think that's but those are the kind of issues that Christians. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Christians tend to vote on the right is because the right tend to go for making it harder for people to have abortions, whereas people on the left, and like you said, maybe go back into the schools and start talking about the values of birth control or those sorts of things. Right. But there are other issues that also have galvanized people. And so the other issues that are coming up now are people talk about immigration and immigration control and whether you should give amnesty or a path to citizenship for the 12 million people who live here. Right. And I want to take a controversial view. Is I actually think you should. That's a Reagan-esque view. Right. Reagan thought that there should be some sort of path to those occupying. Although I know all the arguments against it, but that's where I sort of lean the other way.
It's a sticky issue. It's a sticky issue because what it is it's a moral dilemma. And this is why it's sticky. And we always struggle with moral dilemmas, because the idea is, well, the people that came over here illegally cut in line. They victimized someone. They victimized someone who wasn't able to come over here. They cut in line. They didn't follow the rules specifically. So they did hurt someone. It's not a victimless crime. They came over here and took the place of someone who was waiting to come here legally, who's trying to do it correctly, and taking up the resources ahead of the line of the rest of everyone, taking up the opportunities ahead of the rest of everyone. So because there's that acceptance of the perversion to begin with is what leads to the existence of the moral dilemma, which the moral dilemma is now, what do we do with the people that have been produced from this? Like, because we haven't stepped in soon enough, we didn't operate correctly when we had the chance to at the beginning. Now we have to choose what to do in the situation of a moral dilemma. That's what makes it sticky. And yes, there should be methods and there should be ways of reconciliation. What they are exactly, boy, that's a toughie.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to say the other person that we mentioned him before, but I've seen him in the chat. I don't know if he's still listening right now because I haven't seen him in a couple minutes, but the Rage. So I almost feel like it's almost like a Vouch versus Destiny.
Really?
and I see
you're going to give him that much credit?
if this little war that's between you and the Rage, back and forth videos, or even you had one last night that
it's not really a war. Like I've made like one video on him in like the last month, and people keep asking me about him, and it's like he makes a video about me like every day or like every other day, and like people keep calling it a war. And like the thing is, here's the problem. Like, and I'm probably gonna do a video on this later today to probably just kind of round it up for everyone. And he made a video that actually makes a great media backdrop for me to do it on, which is that like I go through so much of his content, and so much of it is like it's such a level of like really, really dumb that it's almost cringy. And I'm like, I don't like this. It's almost like an insult to me to waste my time responding to it. Like it almost looks like as if I was saying, you people aren't smart enough to see how ridiculous this is. I need to point it out to you, as opposed to, do I really need to respond to this? Like, it's so incredibly contradictory and desperate. And like, I mean, so a lot of it I just kind of like ignore because like I have such better things to do with my time. Like if I'm going to dedicate a day to a stream, I'd like to do something worthwhile, not just, kind of laughing at idiocy. I mean, it's good sometimes and it's fun, but I mean, like Rage takes it to a level of like where it's almost depressing. Like, I mean, there's some dumb atheists out there, but Rage, like, I mean, look at Rage.
I don't think it's fair to say Rage is, I mean, I can say Rage tries to go on the entertainment button. Let's put it that way.
But I mean, he's not exactly like getting a lot of atheists out there who are loving to associate. Well, it's not like as Aaron, like Ryan yesterday in our stream, he had said, where's the Aaron Ross or the larger atheist channels that seem to want anything to do with him? They don't, but he's kind of the guy that just sits there and makes a bunch of noise, and you can kind of count on for like, I guess you would say, good atheist entertainment fodder from here to time, here to there. But like for me to like dedicate my channel to him, like he's done to me, it just doesn't make sense.
So if you had to pick an atheist out there on whose channel you should, I mean, let me ask you this: if we're kind of we were talking a little bit of politics and kind of a mix.
Yeah, sure.
If you're going to pick an atheist or even a socialist, like a Vouch type, who would you go after if you're going to dedicate a little more time on your channel?
Well, like you mean like on the political side?
Yeah, you could pick a political person, or even you've got Vouch, who's he's a gay atheiist socialist,
right?
Marxist. And so, yeah. I mean, you could hit a lot of buttons with that one.
I probably could. Yeah, I mean, I haven't responded to a Vouch video. I haven't gone and really looked at him that much. Maybe I should. Maybe I should do a response video. I'll think about that. I'll look into it. Yeah, I mean, I had a debate with Brenton. I think a few days ago or something like that on Modern Day Debate about Trump or Biden.
And, I didn't see that, or I did see. I saw a little teeny part of that.
Yeah, it was fun. It was interesting. And he's like a kind of like a CNN cheerleader. Like he just gets all of his headlines from CNN. And so like when we went over to the after show, I was debunking finally because I could look up some of the stuff he was saying, and I was debunking it. There on the stream of like some of the things he was willing to believe for it. But I mean, yeah, I liked Brenton. I liked his interaction. Sure, I could probably maybe do some Vosh interactions, reactions, or maybe even Destiny, because I know they're kind of big names in it. And I get it. Like they represent the more sophisticated versions of what the left has to offer. I guess. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, that would be something that would probably be better worth my effort and time,
Well,
honestly.
see, I thought Vaush's stuff was original to Vaush, but then I listened to Richard Wolff. I'm pretty sure that's the last name is Wolff, that professor. Vaush's stuff is mirrored on exactly what Wolff thinks. This whole
Oh,
idea of having more co-ops out there and that sort of thing. He's not advocating Marxism as
right.
it was played out in USSR. He's advocating this new form. But the problem with people like Vaush and other people who are Marxists is, I'm sorry, if you haven't worked a day in your life owning a business or managing people, then I don't think you should have any legs to stand on as far as how you're going to judge a person who's an investor, who's an entrepreneur, who's a capitalist, I have a real problem with those people.
Amen.
So,
Amen. I completely agree.
yeah, go out there, because I've run businesses and I can see the view. That's why I like teaching classes, because I can see the view from both sides. I'm like, well, here's this particular law. How's this going to impact the business owner and the viability of the business, and how's it going to impact the employees? And so you can see it from both sides if you have that lens. But when you don't, Vaush is talking in all of these like hoity-toity elitist views that Marx himself didn't even have a job. He was a mooch himself. And so
right.
it's ridiculous views. So yeah, sorry if you guys are
no, absolutely. No, I agree. Like some of it, but I mean, I know what they're doing. Like many times their hearts are in the right place, which is why, like, and I guess maybe on like my debate with Brenton, I think people were expecting me to really like go in on him, but like both me and Brenton enjoyed the exchange, and like even said so at the end. He even said, "I tip your hat off to you. You're clearly a really smart, well-read guy." And I said, "Yeah, I respect you as a fellow wordsmith," and there was a good exchange. But like, do I believe he probably has a whole bunch of fallacious facts that he's mixing in with some good facts? Yes. I do think he's very knowledgeable on the structure of, governmental systems, and I think he's read a lot into that, which is why it would be really fun to have a debate. In fact, he said that at the debate. I had done a clarification on a socialist question, or I was asked to define socialism, which I gave the more economic policy version of it, and I was asking him, clarify, and he says, "Yeah, I almost wish this is what the debate was about, because this is the most coherent, beginning starting point I've ever heard delivered from someone." So like he was into it. I would like more of those type of higher level interactions, with some of these people on this realm, because I do want to compete with the arguments that are being thrown out there that are the more convincing are the ones I want to gravitate towards, like the ones that people are saying, this is why I believe this. Okay, that's what I want to go after.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of it it's redistribution, and so it's also just switching power from one place to another place. So if you go into socialism in its more pure forms, the idea is taking power away from the business owner and giving it to the government. And the business owner is inspired by trying to keep in business and being efficient. The government's not. So you can already.
Brenton didn't like me defining that. He wanted me to define it as being put in the hands of the worker, because that's what helps us. That's what helps this narrative. But I defined it as basically all the intrinsic wealth of the country being put in the hands of the elites or the infrastructure.
Well, if you want to, just to play the devil's advocate, not really an advocate for the devil, but this, if you look at this view, like in the United States, we've got over 99% of companies are under 500 people. However, about 52% of companies are big businesses. 50% of people are employed by big businesses. In those big businesses, the workers do have lots of control, because in many cases they have stocks in those companies. Those big companies give you stock shares. They give stock options and restricted stock grants, and so you have that opportunity to have some ownership in those firms. So we and the people who are you arguing for?
I have no issue with that. When it's on here's the thing: when it's on a micro level, when a business owner decides to make the people inside, partial owners for the sake of the benefit of the business, what you do is and they used to do this back in the days in the 50s and the 60s, especially with like Ma Bell and Edison and stuff like that. When you gave your employees ownership, you increased their loyalty. Like they were fiercely loyal to the company, like in everything. And what you could do is you could say, well, what you're producing, what you're doing for the benefit of the company, we're going to pay back to you on that. But it wasn't socialistic in terms of its structure to me. It was capitalistic, because it was rewarding good behavior. If you were someone inside the company and you produced something that was really, really good for the company, here's some extra shares of the company for having done this great thing for the company. It wasn't like you're here, you're part of the company, you get shares. That's almost like what it is today, you know.
No, but it's still going on today. There's still a lot of companies, even privately owned companies, that do give a lot of shares, like Publix down where I live in Florida.
I love
Publix is a company that's a privately owned company that everyone has stock shares who works there. And so there's a lot of companies that do that. They already give the ownership. We don't need someone like Vaush coming in and saying, okay, let's stir this or shake this up, because who are they really going after? They're going after the small businesses who can't afford this kind of stuff sometimes.
Right. And what it sounds like Vaush wants to do is create a bunch of micro communistic environments that are all kind of like relying upon. The thing is, what you'll do is you'll just replace privatized sector people with bureaucracies. That's all you'll do. You know, and then you'll control the exact structure someone has to make their business. I mean, what a disastrous, nonsensical economical policy that is. Yeah, no, maybe I should respond to Vaush.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want to respond to him too. We could do a dual video if you want.
Oh, could we? That would be awesome.
I think that'd be a lot of fun, because he, and so he gets in numerous debates, and it's funny when he gets in these debates, he sits sideways so you can see like this ponytail in the back.
Awesome.
It's hilarious. So we have, I think let me ask you this. And I don't know, have you been in any debates where you've debated Jesus's resurrection? Have you gone into that angle yet?
Okay. I did. It was a debate on, I think it was SFT's channel, Standing for Truth. And it was with David P. Neff. And we were debating whether or not Jesus had fulfilled messianic prophecies. And that was a fun debate. Have I done a debate on the actual resurrection evidence? Did Jesus rise from the dead debate? No, I haven't done that yet, but I am hoping for one of those in the near future. I do think it's one of the more important debates that should be going on, especially in terms of like if you're really interested in putting the most convincing argument for Christianity, I think it kind of revolves around that. Because, and I think maybe it was C.S. Lewis kind of put it like this, but he was basically elaborating like on a question that he was asked about, well, like, how do you explain all this stuff with the New Testament, you know, type thing. And his response in a roundabout way was like, well, you know, like once you accept the resurrection, once you accept that that happened and that there's a God that rose Jesus from the dead and that he's sitting at the right hand of God the Father, once you're able to accept the resurrection story, the rest of it is easy. You know, whether or not God could cause an axe head float or, you know, cause the sun to, you know, stop in the sky for a day, or Hezekiah's sun, or, you know, the sundial or whatever it is, you know, all that becomes easy once you accept, you know, the gospel, once you accept who Christ was and what he came to do. And that's, you know, my course instruction to a lot of people, especially new Christians or people who are really interested, you know, start with the story of Jesus, work your way out from there. You know, you're going to be reading the Old Testament. A lot of it's going to be real confusing if you don't know who the heck it's even pointing to, you know, if you're not being led by the Spirit. So like we have the benefit in our modern culture where we have this collective work of God's message to us, you know, to keep us in check, to understand his revelation, you know, and treat it with respect, you know, and people out there, the lower thinking atheists in the group, you know, out there try to apply the least amount of intellectual effort possible to this book that claims to be one of the most complex pieces of literature ever written. And they're defeating themselves inside their own argument and inside their own critique, and they're too dumb to realize it. So
I think a lot of them, like when I go up for the resurrection, because I have debated the resurrection, I think you give all of the evidence that we have, and you give the whole story with the apostles and all that sort of stuff. And then you say, what's the best explanation of all of that evidence? And they say anything that they say can get shot down because it doesn't wash up. It doesn't fit the whole story, the cumulative case.
Right.
And so
did you see that debate that Matt Dillahunty had with Dr.
McClatchy?
Thank you.
Yeah, I reviewed that.
Okay. Bless that man. He's probably a brilliant scholar, but bless you, sir, but you're not a very good debater. In that particular instance, what happened is McClatchy made the best argument of the entire debate in a few moments based upon a question during Q&A, which he had left before, you know, and then came back. But the question was what the debate should have been about, which was the fact that Matt Dillahunty obfuscates, pretends to be a skeptic when he's actually a cynic. And McClatchy had pointed it out and said, well, Matt's position, and basically what he was trying to do was answering a question of could you each steel man each other's position? And so McClatchy said, yeah, sure. Matt basically says, you know, whatever explanation, as long as it's naturalistic, is more plausible than the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And that is every critique around the resurrection, which is, I will take the outer edge of possibility of the explanation of this. As long as it's naturalistic, as long as it's not supernatural, I'll accept it. Even though there's a very, very low probability of this actually being an explanation of this component of the story or this event, I will accept it because it's within my naturalistic framework.
Well, yeah. To give one example of that, so we look at the resurrection, we look at the whole story that has been backed up extra biblically, even by hostile sources. So we have all of this stuff that's ancient, that gives us a lot of support. So people will say, "Well, I will accept." And Tom Jump does the same thing. He tries to find some fringe idea that has actually zero support in the ancient times. He says, number one, he says, well, what about the twin theory? Maybe Jesus had a twin and the twin came back to life. Where is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, where is that? There's nothing in the ancient past.
There's no evidence. Yeah, that's the thing. They will pitch these hypotheses with no evidence for the hypothesis at all. There's like
he's like, because that is better than he rose from the dead. Well, just face the fact. I'm sorry, you have no explanation. You've got nothing that's supported historically. Watching
Richard Carrier debate is some of the most frustrating stuff I ever watch. I watched his debate with Sheffield.
I did too.
Yeah, and that was interesting. But like, he is just like, the fact that he's even debating a side component of the resurrection story as to whether or not there would have been political motivation to dismiss the resurrection of Christ, and he's actually taking the negative on that, blew my mind. Like the fact that he showed up to debate that topic and didn't feel that he was being caught out at how desperate he is to deny this story shocked me. Just staggering. Why would you go through this much effort to deny what is basically a reasoned historical approach to the narrative that both the Jews as well as the Romans have every political motivation possible to dismiss the resurrection of Christ, and yet were not able to do so? Why? Because the man was walking around. You think that the Romans or the Jews didn't think to just send out a story and a narrative? No, you know what? You're hearing this talk about Jesus being alive. Don't. It's just wives' tales. The stinking disciples are just trying to get stuff over. Ignore it. Don't worry about it. Just like they said, the people that fell asleep at the tomb. Tell them the apostles came and took the body or something. It's inside the narrative. Of course they were trying to do it. Of course they were trying to dismiss it. Okay, but they couldn't. Why? Because the man was walking around doing a bunch of stuff. How are you going to tell everyone the guy's dead when he's walking around doing stuff? As John said, so many things in Scripture couldn't even been written in all the books in the world. This is why it couldn't be denied by even the most powerful governmental infrastructures of the day, because it was true.
Yeah, well, and that's just basic stuff. Like, look at the Nazarene inscription from the year 41, where they said that anyone who's caught trying to steal a body from a tomb is going to be condemned. Well, clearly they had an issue with what they thought was going on with Jesus. Their narrative was, somebody must have taken his body. That's what the Jews were trying to put out there.
Let me approach this from a cultural dynamic too, of how asinine that approach is. That the idea that the apostles would have sold the body for the sake of any of this. The apostles, along with Paul, along with every other Jew of the day, was not yet understanding that Christ was the Messiah, except for the group of apostles, because of the fact that Christ was expected to be that earthly, kingly, come and conquer, get rid of Rome Messiah. When he
Daniel
didn't
7.
do that, when he didn't do that, they're like, well, he wasn't the Messiah. They completely missed all the points of the narrative pointing to him as the suffering servant, the one that would save all nations, that he wasn't just there for the Jews. All these things they completely skipped over to draw attention to these perspectives of the text and of who Jesus was. And Jesus came to say, no, I'm these other things too. And that's part of why he was rejected. So the apostles had zero, and I do mean zero, cultural, theological, or rational justification to even believe in the idea of a resurrected Messiah.
Yeah,
Yet
they
they
didn't
all
know what he was talking about when he said,
they didn't know
destroy
what.
this
Yeah,
temple in 3 days, I'll
they had
come
no
back.
clue. They were constantly confused. Like, this isn't what we've been told. We've been taught our whole lives we're coming in as a king, and we're gonna, liberate us from political rulership and make us a great nation again. No more suffering and none of this bad stuff, and we're all great again. This is what you said you're going to do. Why aren't you doing any of this stuff, Jesus? It's
So,
like,
so that was their point, and they were in hiding, and that's quite clear. But I want to point out something that kind of piggybacks on what you with the prophecies thing. Number one, we've got Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, and Zechariah 12:10 that specifically
amen,
said he's going to be pierced.
amen,
Okay, they called him a suffering servant. He's supposed to be humble, according to Zechariah 9:9. He's supposed
amen,
to come into the second temple before it was destroyed in the year 70, according to Malachi 3:1.
amen,
We've got a lot of stuff right there. And then
amen.
we even have in the Talmud, which is written after, it's in AD, a few hundred years later, but in the Talmud, they said, they realized, wait a second, there's supposed to be two kinds of Messiah. In Sanhedrin 97 and 98, it lays out his timing, which was then, and it
Right.
also lays out that there's going to be two types, a humble one, as I described, and the one like Daniel 7 coming in the clouds of glory. That's
Right.
the end times one. So
Exactly. And the Jews in their desperate sophistry have many times tried to, they've stumbled over that. They've stumbled over that because it basically paints a picture of two messiahs.
yeah.
And for them, from their theological framework, that's one of the things even today they kind of struggle with, I know, and lots of debates and how they see that. But yeah, the idea that Jesus is here to fulfill both those roles completely escaped them, and it escaped the apostles, and it escaped Paul. So the only way they would have had this idea, the only way they would have, because again, this is nothing inside Judaism culturally or what was taught at the time, any type of resurrection at all whatsoever. Even the concept not only of a resurrected Messiah, but just resurrection in general was just foreign in terms of a theological framework of what they were digesting from their texts. But now here's all of a sudden Jesus preaching resurrection of himself and resurrection of the flesh for all that believe on him, and they cannot combat it. They can't defeat it. They can't squash it, despite probably their desperation to do so. Why?
Yeah.
Because it really stood on truth. It stood on the fact, no, here Christ has shown us by doing it. No. This is about resurrection of the flesh. This is about your salvation. This is about, and so it completely shifted, completely destroyed, completely went against every single bit of the cultural framework of the apostles. There was no reason for them to believe any of this, but they did. And that speaks volumes to me that they kept this consistent message, this diametric to their culture, contrasted to their culture, something they shouldn't have believed, something they wouldn't have been led to believe in any other instance, to me, justifiably, unless it actually happened.
Well, that's the other thing is, and C.S. Lewis has touched on this in the Old Testament. A lot of the stuff, like in Luke 24, it talks about how their eyes were opened on the road to Emmaus. The people right after Jesus had resurrected, Jesus appeared to them, and their eyes were suddenly opened. And it was also open to the scriptures in the Old Testament. I think because of the demonic forces and Satan and everything else, I think that and Satan very well knew the Bible, very well knew the scriptures. And so I think that a lot of that was kept, they were kept sort of veiled so they wouldn't understand everything that's in there until hindsight.
Absolutely. Well, and I believe that was also to a point of the benefit of God wanting to build a relationship with people, saying, you have to digest this. Christ said, it's John 6, maybe John 5, you can't come to me unless you've come by the Father. It's what are the
No one comes to the Son except through the Father.
Right. And the idea, of course,
the Father sends him. That's it.
Right. And but you continue later on the passage, you see that it's about having received the full instruction from the Father. If you've heard the Father's voice, then you're able to know who I am, essentially. So if you've accepted the entirety, the congruency of Scripture for saying what it's saying, you'll be able to recognize me. You'll be able to know who I am. You'll know what I'm here to do. It's almost a litmus test to whether you could recognize the Son, whether or not you even could come to him, is whether or not you've received your appropriate and complete congruent instruction from the Father in Scripture. That's what shows you Christ. That's what directs you towards him.
Yeah. I agree, Susan. I don't think Satan knew Jesus would be resurrected. I think that Satan would have never occupied Judas had he thought that he was working for the better good of what's going to happen.
Let me touch on that briefly, if you don't mind. This is how I look at it. I think Jesus certainly spoke volumes when he looked at the Pharisees and Sadducees, and you are of your father, the devil. And here's what I think. I think that the interpretation of Scripture that was about Christ being only and only a political earthly Messiah was a very fleshly, very non-spiritual interpretation of Scripture. Sounds like the type of interpretation Satan himself would have. So if Satan shared the interpretation with the Pharisees and Sadducees, expecting Christ to be a political earthly Messiah, he likely would have believed, well, if I kill Jesus, I kill the prophecy. So in my mind, Satan just got played. Like in an incredibly
well, it's in Paul's mind too. Paul made it pretty clear in his epistles that Satan was played.
Right. Yeah. He basically was anticipating things from the text like the fleshly Jews were. They were both wrong. And Satan ushered in his own defeat and destruction because he did not interpret the text as being instructed from the Father. He could not recognize who Jesus actually was. And so, yeah, he ended up working to kill Jesus, believing he was winning. I believe we actually see this. If you dissect the temptation of Christ with that perspective and framework, that passage gets very interesting. Yeah, maybe we could dissect that sometime. That would be a fun journey. But yeah, I take it from that approach that, you know, I don't have that Calvinistic approach of like, well, Satan just had to, or he couldn't help himself. No, we have an incredibly amazing God who created an incredibly complex revelation. I have to believe that was for purpose. There was a lot of evil prying eyes that were looking to find ways to stop God from manifesting what he wanted to manifest. And that's why you will see things in the Scripture, as the atheists point out, say, why isn't it just blatant and clear? You don't understand reality, sir. This place is a battlefield of spiritual forces. God is operating within the scopes of his morality and righteousness and dealing with the sociology of men on earth. Delivering prophecies of certain specificity can be dangerous. And I use an example that popped up in The Matrix. You know the Matrix movie? Have you seen it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You know when he walks in to see the Oracle and he walks in, the first thing she says, don't worry about the vase. And so he turns around, knocks over the vase. And then like he's like, how did you know? And she's like, oh, what'll really bake your noodle later is, would you still have broken it if I hadn't have told you? And see, that's the idea where God in his sociological genius can compromise a prophecy by its delivery. How it's delivered, how specific it's delivered, how vague it's delivered, all these things are dynamics as to its success and function. So what atheists judge as a necessity, a standard of hyperspecificity, is literally outside the realm of reality, not only for the text, but also reality itself.
You know, you're touching on something that I think we should address. And it's I got in a little rumble last night on Twitter about this, but it's free will. We have free will. And this is the atheists do not understand this very significant concept. Yes. So if we have free will, they say, well, how can God know what we're going to do? No, if God knows what we're going to do, then we don't have free will. And I'm like, no, because God's omnipresent. God has already seen your entire life play out. And so he knows what you're going to do. He knows what you, and I take the Molinist view. He knows what you will, would, and will do under various circumstances.
Exactly. Middle knowledge. God possesses all factors of potential middle knowledge. He understands.
So it means we still have free will, but he's just seen us and he knows what we would do in certain, and I think he's put us to maximize and optimize our situation to get to heaven.
Exactly. And this also explains by nature of his righteousness, him holding back from acting upon us, even though he knows what we're going to do. And that has to do with his stance of righteousness. Like for David, he could have judged David before David did what he did to keep David from doing what he would do. But that would be literally by definition immoral, because then David is being judged before he's done anything, which means God operates inside a respect for the dynamic, for the moral framework, for the universe that he created. He respects his own righteousness inside the universe. He limits himself by his decision of sovereignty to limit himself by constructing the universe in that way. But that means that he himself, by nature of his righteousness, can't do certain things, lest they violate a component of his eternal nature. So God is operating from a stance of being respectful to the reality he himself created. That's perfectly understandable to me.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to say to Craig Reed, I was going back and forth with a bunch of people on Twitter. I don't even remember. One of them was Renee, the Renevelation. So he was asking me about God questions. So it's, and I get, like, if I say something a lot of times on Twitter, I'll attract a lot of people who don't like what I say. So I find more atheists are in my notifications by a landslide than Christians, which actually, I'm not sure that, I don't really think that's a good thing. I'm trying to get, how do I flip that?
Yeah, I've pulled off Twitter. Like, well, I mean, I shouldn't say I pulled off Twitter. Like, I've left Twitter because I was banned several times. I'm just like, don't want to make another account. But like having debates at 140 characters each is just exhausting.
Yeah,
you know, I'd almost rather just kind of be, you know, in front of the this thing talking and just, you know, again, a lot of people probably don't like that. A lot of people are just keyboard warriors because they need time to type it and edit it and reread it and then, you know, check Google and then send it. And I like to be challenged on the fly. I get a lot of criticism for it, but that's just because they don't respect me doing that. Like, I'm not a keyboard warrior. I don't like being a keyboard warrior. I like responding on the fly. I like acting on the fly. If I don't know something, I want to learn something, you know, but I want to be bold. I want to be bold. And you know, even though I'm not really heavily science prone, I haven't studied tons of science, I will still show up and do a science debate. I've now done it twice, once with Erica Gutchetson and once with Matthew Wheat, both on, is it Matthew Wheat?
Is it Jackson Wheat?
Sorry, Jackson Wheat. So I've debated Jackson Wheat and Erica, both of them on evolution. But I don't need to necessarily compete on the scholastic level to challenge the philosophy behind it. And so that's what I did. I showed up and I challenged them based upon my perspective of the philosophy inside the hypotheses and conclusions of which they're using and promoting and believing. And I'm perfectly happy to go and do those types of debates, you know, and I believe that most Christians should. I mean, if we believe what we believe, I think we should have good reasons for what we believe. I mean, keep learning, keep going out there and looking and studying and challenging yourself. Because if we do indeed believe on truth, that's just what you're going to continue to find, is more truth.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I feel like when I first came back to Christianity, I should say, and I was kind of, you know, getting online and discovering all these atheists because I didn't really know any atheists like that. And so they were all coming after me and I was afraid to read their stuff. And then I started reading their stuff and I thought, that's the best argument they have. We're pretty good.
Yeah,
because the more I looked into it, the stronger Christianity became. I want to say, wait, somebody said something in the chat here. I wanted to answer. Hold on one second. I don't like debating science so much. I'd rather debate something closer to my field, my academic field. So, but it says here, ask Smokey, Mindbreaker 101, ask Smokey what made him more willing to accept the middle and a little less partial to being open. I'm not sure if he's talking about.
He's such a jerk. Okay, Mindbreaker. Okay, Mindbreaker. He's one of my Patreons. He's a good guy. He's light trolling me because I admitted that there was a brief period in my life where I was an open theist, and so now he just makes fun of me for, oh, that was a dumb thing to believe, huh, Smokey? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, so he kind of trolls me with like these open theist jokes here and there, like I can't accept the middle, like I don't accept middle knowledge, so you know, that type of thing. So it's the type of thing only an open theist would recognize as a jab at them. So yeah, he's well played. Well, so if you guys in the chat have questions, feel free to put them out there. They're kind of going back and forth with each other there in the chat. There's a little conversation going on about people wearing pants right now. So I don't know what tangent they're on now, but I love the atheist bots. I wonder if they programmed like a few bots, like Lucifer Almighty and Iron Charioteer. I don't think are actual people. I think they might be. Yeah, I think they might be AI that the atheists just programmed to go into every chat and just give a blanket insult or dismissal with no justification at all. Just
they can prove us wrong if they say something unusual right now.
Right. Oh, they could. Yeah, but see, like, for instance, Lucifer says Smokey is horrible at philosophy. Smokey loses debates. You know, like, it's just the same statement over and over again. And I think they just programmed the bots to basically go into our rooms and say the same blanket dismissals with no actual logical justification whatsoever. Because I don't think they can program that far yet. But, like, they're not conversational. They just come in and make statements and accusations and ad homs at you is all.
Well, so he can prove us wrong. Both of them can prove us wrong if they want to make a statement that goes beyond the ad hom.
The bot was programmed to have laughy faces. See, I'm proving it. See, the bot is trying to hide itself.
So wait, Susan says hi to you. So I want to make sure you know Slam RN.
Yeah, I love Slam. Actually, she found my channel when I was like 37 subs, like tiny, like months ago. And she was
Oh,
one of the first people like pushing me out there and promoting me and liking what I was doing and telling people about me, and even got Sam Shamoon to come on my channel
oh,
while I was
yeah.
under 100 subscribers, which was amazing. And we had just an incredible conversation that's still on my channel right now. Yeah, Slam's been a great, incredible, wonderful Christian sister and supporter. And we're both huge Hugh Ross fans. And
Yeah, I am too.
she's a close friend with Hugh Ross as well, I guess. So we have a lot in common and stuff. Yeah, she's great. I love Slam.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, some great people in here. I just had somebody ask something. I just lost the question. Hold on, I just got to find it back. Hold on one second
Right.
here. It was got people talking about, oh, Tommy Wright 3, Meet Your Maker. What do you think, SJ? I'm not sure who that is. Do you know who that is?
One more time.
Tommy Wright, I'll Meet Your Maker. Oh, I'll Meet Your Maker.
I
Do you know?
don't know who that is. No.
Okay. So
I
yeah,
don't know
so
what that's about. Yeah, I don't know what that's about.
Vekel says hi. Rage says he's a bot. So you can prove you're not a bot if you come on and you personally
Well,
present
yeah, no,
yourself.
Rage, you can't be a bot because you actually come in the room and talk trash. Like
Yeah.
you're actually willing to get in a room and make yourself look dumb. The other ones have to do it in chat.
You're just like, guys.
I know.
Rage is
You have an
totally going to be
affinity to
making a
Rage.
video.
I know. He needs to. It'll be fun. No. Oh no. Trust me. I can't show up anywhere without him making a video about it. So I almost guarantee it.
So Rage. Well, I should have at some point. I'll invite maybe you and Rage, and you guys can have a debate.
If you want to host, and he's willing to do it, I'm game. Supposedly we were going to have a climate debate, and instead of doing that, he just made a video about how he won a climate debate with me. So, yeah, you want to host something? He keeps seeming to not follow through. He was supposed to show up on Maddox's channel with me. That never happened either. So he just likes to make videos about me. So
he says this is so going to be a video.
yeah, see, like he just likes to make videos about me. So he's my number one fan.
That is awesome. So you guys
look at this. Like, imagine that this is like one of the first times, like in Rage's career, that someone has triggered this man so severely that like Matt Powell is a small issue at this point. Like,
oh, he's moving. That's yesterday's news. He's
right. Oh no, Matt Powell, no, Smokey. Oh, this guy's the big threat. We gotta focus on him. Like the validation is flattering.
Can I rap, SJ? I'm not much of a rapper. Can you rap, Smokey?
No, that is not my forte.
No, I'm not good at rapping.
I never messed.
Well, I'll tell you, I did make up I'll tell you my one rap song that I made up when I was in college, and we used it on our answering machine when we used to have answering machines.
Right.
Said, hey, listen, cats, we'd love to chat, but we're out on the town. No, have no fear, we're drinking beer, and we'll be back around. What's your name and what's your sign? Are you a sorry cat? Because if you are, you won't get far your message. Or you're a sorry case, because if you are, you won't get far your message got erased. But if you're cool, don't be a fool and just now cut the line. You've heard our rap, so what's your flap? And don't forget your sign.
That's outstanding. Yeah, I want a rap battle between you and G-Man. I think that's
the only rap I've made, but I memorized it a long time ago.
Outstanding.
Hey, thanks for the super sticker, Converse Contender.
There you go, Converse. Shout out. I like Converse.
Yeah, when I was in college, I liked beer. I haven't had beer in a long time, but I definitely liked beer when I was in college. So
shout out to Converse, who was the moderator on the biggest dumpster fire debate like of all time on Modern Day Debate, where we had T-Jump team up with Godless Girl to take on me and Music Analyst. Oh, did you see that one?
T-Jump and Godless Girl to take yes, wait a second, I did see that. Oh my gosh, that was crazy.
She passed
Godless
out.
Girl's been on my channel.
She got drunk and passed out.
Yes, that was bad. I like Godless Girl. I want Godless Girl to come back on my channel because she was funny when she was on my channel.
Hilarious. No, as she said before, I know we're still friends because like she even said before, like before the debate, she's like, okay, we're just gonna go at each other, okay? But after this, we're still friends, okay? I'm like, yes, sweetheart, we're good. Go ahead, you do what you got to do, no problem. And so I know she like, there's no hard feelings. She's doing her thing.
Yeah,
like because she came onto my channel when I was like extra tiny. I think she was like, she found me when I was like 7 subscribers. I'm like, I was doing I remember what happened. Like it was one of the first streams I did, and I was looking for things to do. So I reviewed an episode of the Atheist Experience, and none other than Darth Dawkins comes in. And wherever Darth Dawkins goes, the trolls will follow. So soon enough, I have Godless Girl, TRN, and Jack Angstrich all in my stream, with no one really watching my stream, but these people are all in my. I have more people in my stream than are watching my stream right now, and they're, Darth Dawkins is basically saying, if you let these people in, I'm leaving, and then Godless Girl comes in, we have a decent interaction, an interesting talk, and she even starts promoting me. We do a couple videos, we do a collab together, we even do a review with Batman together, we do a debate together against vegans. We did several things together, and she's one of the people that actually did help me grow when I was super tiny. So no, I give kudos to Godless, and I appreciate it for that.
Yeah. Well, now that's a really interesting group, because I've seen her channel. I'm subscribed to her channel, and she's got that Jack Angstrom. I've never had him, but that's one of her main people that she promotes.
Yeah, I think Jack Angstrich is really brilliant. Like seriously, like the guy is probably next to genius. I mean, and not just because of what he knows, but because how he dissects things. Like he's very, like, in terms of like applying philosophy, like dissecting the abstract. Like he is really, really smart. I mean, he just doesn't, I don't think he does much on YouTube. He kind of, he's more just like in Discord having conversations and stuff. But yeah, no, the guy's very, very sharp. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know him at all, really, but I do know Darth, because Darth came on my channel for the first time a few days ago and caused kind of a ruckus and then left.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
He said, yeah, so that was it.
Praise had gone into his Discord and asked Dawkins about me, and I told Praise before he went in there, I said, dude, the moment you mention my name, I guarantee auto triggering. He's going to go off on me. And sure enough, Praise mentioned my name. What do you think about Smokey? Oh, Smokey, so you know what? He's nothing to be worried about. This and this. And he came in here and he just went on a whole diatribe of a bunch of lies and nonsense to obfuscate what happened. And by the way, on my channel, you will see I have a playlist called Smokey's Darth Dawkins Saga. If you want to know how my interactions with Darth unfolded and concluded, go check it out.
That sounds really good, because you've already said you're not a Calvinist. I think Darth might be a young Earth creationist Calvinist.
He's denied. I've heard him on stream deny being Calvinist, but I've also heard him agree to predestination. So I don't know.
Maybe he's not then.
Yeah, I mean, he might be like he might be like a 3 or 4 point Calvinist or something like that, where he's not comfortable calling himself a Calvinist. And I've met a few of those. Like they say like they're almost not comfortable saying they're Calvinists because they don't agree in all 5 points of tulip. So, it's weird these days, because you almost have to ask someone, like, you almost can't even just ask them if they're Calvinists. You basically just start the conversation with, do you believe in predestination? And then you just unpack from there, because it's just become kind of such a mess, in that stuff. So.
Yeah. So James Farmer wants to know, he says, what is your opinion on Schuyler Fiction's internal critique on Christianity and his 5-point premise using morality and how God contradicts himself based on killing is wrong, but he orders killing?
Yeah, what happens is Schuyler constructs a weak straw man God, injects him into the text, and then starts making judgments. And the problem is that Schuyler is too stupid to be doing complex things like that. So him claiming it to be an internal critique is basically just laughable. The fact that he basically defines God outside of the text instead of defining God inside the text, and then judges from that way out, it just shows how incredibly, desperately dishonest he is in actually digesting what's in front of him.
So that's I don't know with Schuyler. Actually, I kind of have this strange relationship with Schuyler, because I became sort of friends with him not too long ago. He came on my channel and we decided we hit it off. We were going to be friends and try not to do these anti-videos.
Yeah, I've referred to him as Trash Santa, so we're not on great terms. So.
But I can say about Schuyler, see, I don't. The idea of, and you mentioned this before with slavery in the Old Testament, I feel like people, I feel like it's becoming like it's almost getting to be amusing when you see people show up with those same old Old Testament arguments that God is a moral monster and that sort of thing. Because I think it's been refuted. It's numerous times people have said you have to see the context. You have to understand this is descriptive and not prescriptive in the Old Testament and all those things, but they still keep bringing up the same old stuff.
It's a misinterpretation of the nature of the reality that's being painted from the text. And what they do is, again, it's creating a very simple straw man type of God, as if his only components are infinitely loving, infinitely good, and infinitely powerful. And because of that, if there's evil in the world, therefore this God can't possibly exist. They leave out all the components of the God claim that are inside our narrative text that also add to that. He also is righteous. He also respects free will. He also constructed this reality for a purpose. He also has a plan for it. They keep all these things out of the critique to make their case. Is what makes it dishonest. Like when you pull who God is out of the text, and then that's what you use to critique, now you're going to do it honestly. Schuyler starts piecing together his idea of what he thinks a God would be in his mind, and then he uses that to judge the text. And he doesn't listen to correction when people tell him, this is fallacious. You're ignoring important components of who God is in order to make your statement. You're criticizing a straw man God. And what I notice about Schuyler that I don't like, and especially because, he's like, Schuyler to me in debates is kind of like, from The Simpsons, what is it, Helen Lovejoy, and she'd always stand up in the chapel and say, won't someone think of the children? Like that's like him in every debate, because it's always about the children. And when you catch him in an argument, this kind of happened this actually happened on Praise's stream. I had a mild interaction with him when he came into Praise's stream, kind of challenging him on some of this, is when I get him backed into the corner of admitting the fact he's basically leveraging a moral dilemma that he has no solution for inside the text, is that he steps back, he puts his hands up, he makes some animated gestures, and he says, well, if you guys, want to believe that killing babies is fine, I'm good with that. And he thinks he wins the debate every single time. And this is the type of dishonesty that I see, that Schuyler is just transparent to me on this. And I dislike, I guess, the dynamic that seemingly, whether Dr. Josh is his friend or not, the fact that he seems to validate this type of vacuous, shallow thinking, I don't think does wonders for Dr. Josh's reputation, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, it's strange with Dr. Josh, because I can say it now. I've had him on my channel too a couple times, and the thing about him that's interesting is when we talk about slavery in the Bible, and he goes on modern day debate with Dr. Michael Brown, who's very knowledgeable about the Old Testament and about the ancient Near East and about how things were back then. They were on the same, it was kind of a debate, but really it was more like two scholars patching each other on the back, because Josh was agreeing with everything that Michael was saying. And then he goes into the context with Schuyler, and it's kind of like he's laughing about slavery in the Bible. And then he wrote a book, which I ordered, it still hasn't arrived, but he wrote a book on slavery and how God ordained slavery. And I think to myself, God permitted slavery, kind of like God permitted divorce. And it's
the idea is that what if you were to take the place of God back then, understanding you still have to work within the sociological constructs that you've constructed in humanity, and that you're not looking to micromanage and violate free will, what other economic system other than servitude would you institute? And the atheist has no answer to that challenge, because we still rely upon servitude even to this day. Our 13th Amendment, if you read it, says it abolishes slavery, except, pretty important word, except in instances of prosecution for crimes. So we even still today recognize all of our prisoners as property of the state. Mm-hmm. They are property. They have been transitioned from individual free-thinking humans to property. They are property because of what they have done. They have basically had their liberties and freedoms annexed by the state for the sake of the good of civility. So this has always been an essential component of any type of structured civilized society. And back in a time where you didn't have penal systems, where you didn't have places to put these people, servitude, slavery, household positions was generally, or even in the instances probably more differentiated, more unsavory crimes, you probably put them into hard labor. You would have instances where you have a solution without having to create a system that was untenable to them back then, which would be a penal system. This is atheists engage in something called presentism. Are you familiar with the term?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, you're judging ancient cultures by your modern standard, which is fallacious to begin with for the atheist component to begin with, because the atheist is judging everything subjectively anyway. They're judging other cultures subjectively by what their culture presents, which basically means they can only potentially stand on a stance of bigotry to judge another culture. If they're doing it to an ancient culture, they're ignoring the fact that they did not have access to the same infrastructure we do. They didn't have penal systems regulated trade. They didn't have central currency. They didn't have walls, defense systems, they police, firefighters, roads. None of these things were in their ancient societies. They were pursuing the highest possible morality based upon what they had available.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but atheists look at it and point the picture at the Bible and say, well, the Christians say everything in here is objectively moral. Take slaves. That's a perversion of the message of the text and how we read it in order to make their case. It's sophistry. It's disgusting.
Well, that's the thing is you look into how societies were formed, how societies were built, and you just go back into all of the ancient worlds. And when they were building societies, it was kind of like what those little Minecraft games are, these other games where people go around plundering other people's stuff, because that's all they did. The ancient societies were always going around plundering each other's goods, stealing each other's people, and using those people as slaves to form their cities and to build their places. It was everywhere. This is not that any place that had a relatively decent sized population, this was happening.
No, there was no potentiality of any functional economy without it. It's just it's literally one of those things where it's a nature of the beast moment. Like, atheists just are that desperate to ignore reality. Based upon the way our reality is structured with the essentiality of free will and hierarchies, servitude is inseparable from human culture. Now, whether you want to make an argument of which person's or which culture's servitude was wrong, we can have that conversation. Mm-hmm. But don't just sit here like, again, bigot brain and say slavery is universally wrong. The slavery that was done to the African Americans under the auspices of evolution that taught that these were not actually actually men, but devolved people, therefore closer to animals, therefore fit to be treated like animals, is night and day from how the Jews were treated. I imagine many of the African slaves, if not all of them, would have been overjoyed to have had the opportunity to have been treated like an ancient Hebrew slave over what they suffered under the European slave trade and beyond. So, it's this lack of awareness of history and culture and what type of reality we're living in. It's the avoidance of these issues. It's the demanding on God to do things different, not understanding that by their perceptions, they're making things worse. It's this sophistry. It's this arrogance. It's this hubris. Like, I can decide that God should have done it this way, and therefore God can't exist. You people are shameful. I mean, just absolutely intellectual degenerates when you're indulging things like this.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If people do a responsible take on something, like, have you read Dominion by Tom Holland?
Oh, maybe it might be one of those ones I picked up and is like, well, this is interesting. I'll get back to you in a couple months. Yeah, I'm not sure.
It's huge.
I'm going to go with no. Yeah, then let's go.
You probably haven't read it because you would know, because he came out relatively recently. I advise you to read it because he was an agnostic and he took it from the agnostic lens. He's written up on the Muslim population too, but he started looking at the rise of the Christian world. The Christianity's impact on the world since Jesus, and he traced it all the way through history, and suddenly he decided that now he's a Christian, and he says that he at least relates to cultural Christianity. He's probably working his way back in a good way, but he looked at it honestly and looked at Christianity's massively positive impact on society. We helped get rid of slavery. Of course, there were Christian slave owners who were horrible, and they were tearing parts of the Bible out to deny that for the slaves. Right. But Christian abolitionists, Christianity in universities, hospitals, schools, it's done a massive service for society. And even the idea of individualism, this respect for human dignity, that's a Christian thing. That's something that was different than how the Romans were treating their people.
Oh, well, even way different back in the Hebrew times. None of the contemporary cultures were valuing slave life. There is a lot of critique thrown at the famous verse about beating slaves. There is no method of keeping certain slaves in check other than corporal punishment. And if any atheist has a solution to that, I recommend you go get your Nobel Prize and go tell the prison system so they can stop beating and macing people. But no, corporal punishment is also one of those core components of correction, especially in an ancient culture. So that should be dismissed on its face. But aside from that, the only reason that law exists, the only reason that case law is even there for us to read and critique and criticize, is because the Jews actually had a principle where a slave master could die for the death of a slave under their care. If they were like the rest of their contemporaries, where they could just kill slaves at whim, at random, whenever they felt like it, or in the case of the Egyptians, even bury them alive with their masters. When you could do things like that with human life, when you had no value of it, then they make this critique. It's just, again, it's fallacious. The Jews valued life. They valued the life of the slave. This is why a law like this need to be there. The law wouldn't even be there if the Jews treated the slaves like the rest of the people around them and could just kill them at whim. So like, they don't understand how gross the atheists are being by even posing the challenge to begin with, not even giving the Jews credit for having found the highest possible moral good in what would have been a moral dilemma, difficult situation of which to structure in a governmental way, which could actually be legislated and enforced.
Yeah, I mean, they also forbade kidnapping, which is exactly how
Correct.
the African trade was perpetuated. And they also said that if a slave escapes, you're actually to provide him shelter.
Right.
And so that's completely different than, we had to have the Underground Railroad system to provide people a means to get out. And then if they were caught, they had to be returned.
Well, and the idea is too that, and people don't want to digest it necessarily from the legal framework. Understand that all these laws, this was just like the beginning point. Most of these matters all had to go between a court or a Sanhedrin or something like that to actually judge these matters. It's not like someone showed up and said, oh, that person broke this law, they need to be punished with this. There was a system. There was a legal system in place. Someone was accused of doing something, or something had happened, like something had to be convened, there decisions that had to be made. These were not just arbitrarily put out there sanctions. Like, stuff had to be settled. This is, but they don't get that type of credit usually in the society. But this is how they did things. It's not just someone did something. It's just, the idea was that these laws are like the objective standard as opposed to the starting point of councils. This is part of that perversion in perspective. Like the idea that this thing is absolutist in this way. This thing is the beginning point of the moral structure of the legal system of how people are supposed to judge by. This is what you go by. This is the norm. This is the standard. If you discover this is what you need to do. But it's just saying this is what you begin with when you're doing your, investigation is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's proper. So, Smokey, I want to say we're getting kind of close to 2 hours. I think maybe we should.
Wow, that fast? My goodness, it was a blast. Time flew by. Appreciate it. I
know you have fun with it. It's like two people. I think we each got a lot of talk time in there. We got a lot of different topics covered. It's pretty good stuff.
Amen. Absolutely, and I would be happy to come on and do it anytime. Even if you want to do a debate review or something eclectic, I am at your disposal. I really appreciate it.
Great. Yeah, let's do that. I would like to go in. You and I watch a Vaush video.
And, that sounds fun. In fact, I'll save it for you. I will save Vaush for you. I will admit to not expose myself to too much Vaush or look into him until I have the chance to do it with you. And that will be a thing. And I will get my introduction and see how fallacious and nonsensical some of this stuff looks like.
Good. And I noticed another good one would be if I would pair up with you to go against Aaron Ra and whoever else on Christianity, on did Jesus rise from the dead?
Sure. I'd be down for it. Amen. Absolutely.
So I'd like to do that because I think you'd be a good, with Aaron Ra, I think he would overrun me a little bit in the conversation because I have a tendency to be overrun sometimes. But I think you would be able to sort of, put him you'd be able to stop some of that, I think.
I think I could with some certainly appropriate questions here and there. Absolutely. No, Aaron Ra is not very theologically well versed, and Eric Hernandez just really kind of embarrassed him on that whole pistis and faith thing. That was beautiful. I watched that every once in a while. That was so funny. But no, like
I reviewed that with a Godless Girl. That's the debate I reviewed with Godless Girl when Eric got up there. It was the IP debate.
Yes, that was funny. Yes, that was funny. Yeah, no, I'd love to do a tag team debate with you too on any of these topics, that you think would be appropriate or so. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone, I basically will debate anyone. The only time is I start to get I don't want to waste my time. So if I notice someone is particularly dishonest or not really interested in truth or a conversation, they're just basically an activist with their own thing. That's when I start saying I want moderation. But otherwise, I'll debate pretty much anyone, anytime on any topic. And I have open mics all the time, at least once a week. You guys can come into my show. I have the link posted in the description. You can join my show live. challenge me, question me, pitch, theological quandaries, whatever you can come up with. And I do that at least once a week. So that's, and many times, multiple times a week. Like even if I do a regular show, I'll usually even post an open mic link at the end. So if you guys come and stick around and you actually want to interact and unpack some of these issues, come to the channel, subscribe, pay attention when we have a live open mic. Everyone's welcome to join.
Excellent. And so I want to say, just before people go, at 4:00 on Sunday, I'm also going to do an open chat, just like what you're doing. And so I'm going to do an open chat. And the question is God dead?
Okay. Outstanding.
I'm trying to get people's attention. I think that one will.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a little bit clickbait for sure. Absolutely. I agree.
So yeah, I like to do some clickbait every once in a while.
I haven't. I should try to be more clickbaity from here to, well, I guess I am sometimes.
You got to get people's attention. I put a title out there. They're going to be going through this titles.
I'm still new at this. I'm still learning. I'll polish that up a little bit. God bless you, SJ. This was a lot of fun. I look forward to doing it again sometime with you.
Yeah, 4 Eastern. I'm also going to have former Texas, Miss Texas. She's going to come to my channel again, Lori, and we're going to talk about social justice warriors and the Bible and its relationship. And then on the 16th, I'm going to have Dr. Michael Heiser on here.
Oh, I love Dr. Heiser. Oh, yeah. Yes, that's going to be fun. Okay, I'll definitely tune in for that. Absolutely.
Good. Now, what do you have? Do you want to go ahead and plug anything you've got going on? Any upcoming debates?
Yeah, actually, we do have we have an interview that's coming up. I possibly have a debate maybe coming up next Thursday, which I think might be on biblical slavery. We're still working out the details, so I don't really want to shout that out too much just yet. But we do have an interview coming up. I think it's the 17th, I want to say, where we're interviewing a astrophysicist, and we're going to be going through some of the cosmological fine-tuning components. It's Peter J. Busey from Glasgow University, and he's done a lot of kind of component research and practice in the CERN research field, and he's incredible. So he's going to come in, and we're going to walk through with an interview on some information with the fine tuning of the universe, the different models of the origin of the universe, the Big Bang, the Big Bounce, the multiverse, and he's going to kind of unpack it from his perspective of how viable or just complete grade A nonsense they are. So we're going to talk about that. Tony's going to be there. Good boy Tony, he's a pharmaceutical chemist. So I bring him in to kind of do more of the science type of interviews because he's more like leaned that way than I am. I'm more history, theology, culture, sociology, that type of stuff is the things that I've looked into and read a bit about. So I kind of yield and tip the hat to Tony to come in and know a little bit better the right questions to ask, and so it'll be a fun interview, and I hope everyone comes by and checks that out.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I like to, and I'm kind of like you on those same fields. Those are the fields I've looked into more than, and of course business, because that's my field, but more than some of these other things like science. So I like to listen to the science because I don't know as much about it. So it's fascinating. Right.
And I'm still learning. Yeah, I'm still learning. That's part of the benefit of listening to a lot of these debates, because it's been very science heavy for a lot of time. But, I do want to shake up some of the complacency inside the community. It seems it's like everyone is taking themselves a little too seriously. That's number one. Like truth is being obfuscated by protection of feelings and nonsense. And two, there seems to be just the same arguments floating around in repetitive order over and over and over again. And I want us to try and it just seems like we haven't moved past the same layer of arguments we were, and it's time to now push to some deeper layers, some deeper arguments, try and push back the sophistry, the agenda, the talking points. Let's have some real conversations. So and that's what my channel's about, and that's why I do all these open mics, because I do want to have the real conversations and promote the real conversations. Oh, and I will shout out this. Let me shout out this real quick. Tangelo Grasso. You guys know he's infamous.
Yeah, how do I know that name?
Tangelo is the one that's been banned from every one of the atheist call-in shows because he keeps owning them and destroying them.
Is that the guy from South America?
Yes, Tangelo from Brazil. Yes,
I heard him. He was hilarious. He was on the Atheist Experience.
Okay, so I am working with him. I'm going to be joining him on a project to have a 24-hour running live Christian talk show where basically we come in, run shifts. Atheists can come in at any time, post challenges, talk with Christians, all that stuff, and keep it as, you know, respectful environment of instruction and learning about the strengths of the Christian faith. We may have like 12-hour shifts or something. We're still working out the details, but the name of that channel is The God Talk TV.
Okay.
And that's by Atangelo. So, and that's something, if you come over to my channel, you can find it real easy. So, yeah, the God Talk TV, and that's going to be outstanding. That's something I'm excited to do, and put some effort into, to really have an environment where we are actively engaging the atheist community, you know, online, and that might come to us, and showing that we're not afraid, we're not ashamed, we're ready to pitch arguments, we're ready to defend our faith, and we're ready to point out the dumpster fire ideologies you're pushing in our culture. So we're ready, and we're going to do it.
Good. That sounds great. And I'm so glad, Otangelo. I'm gonna have to go find that channel. Tell me the name of that channel one more time.
God Talk TV.
God Talk TV. Okay,
Yeah.
I will find that.
I believe it's The God Talk.
The God Talk TV.
Yeah, I believe that's what it is. I'm gonna put, what I'll do is I'll post it. I haven't posted it yet, but I'll post it as a featured channel on my homepage. So if people want to find it, just go over there.
Great.
You'll be able to locate it. Yeah. So yeah,
great.
perfect.
Well, thank you. Well, listen, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Thank you guys, everybody, for coming in here. Thank you, everyone. Please like and subscribe, and do come again. And I'm going to link Smokey. Go ahead and subscribe to Smokey's channel. Make sure you fill that up. He wants to hit 1,000. So if all of you guys who've listened today subscribe, we're getting there. We're getting closer. So thank you so much.
God bless everyone.
So I just want to mention one last thing. Jesus is the way. That's it. God bless.